Oh, we've got Hurricane Helene entering the Gulf of Mexico, about to undergo some rapid strengthening, and it's straight for the Florida Panhandle and the southeast U.S., and that includes the entire state of Georgia and parts of western, south of North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. It's going to be a rough Thursday night into Friday in the southeast, and of course, we've got the landfall to deal with in the Florida Panhandle, which will come late tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. We're going to go through all the watches and warnings, and we'll take a look at what's going on right now. There's a reconnaissance aircraft there, and as we speak, so we'll see what it finds. So fasten seatbelts, folks. It's the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And for those of you who would like to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, you could do it if you shop on Amazon and use our referral link that's pinned at the top of the chat board or on the description to this video. It's pretty simple. Just search for whatever it is you're buying, buy it. Amazon will throw us back a little coin out of their pocket, and it goes a long way to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast and to keep ads at an absolute minimum. So I got a test run today, Joe, because we had thunderstorms. Actually, we still have rain. It's still raining. We had thunderstorms and severe weather across North Georgia this afternoon, and it knocked my power out. And the thing was, I'm trying to decide, should I go to my daughter's tomorrow and spend it down near Metro Atlanta rather than be up here in the mountains? And when I lost my power, I said, well, you know what? I think my decision was made for me.
Well, I've been, we've been kidding for ever since you moved down, I should say, to Georgia, as to whether or not there was adequate backup in case something like this happened today. And I know I even just yesterday I said, do you have a generator? And you said no, but
Yeah. Well,
maybe.
to be fair, I seldom lose power here. And when I have lost power, they've been really good about getting it back fairly quickly. I think it was maybe a little over an hour, and the power came back on. So,
That's
you
pretty
know,
good considering where you are located. I mean,
yeah,
I'm obviously in a place where there's a lot more there are a lot more people, and there's a little bit more in terms of congestion and everything. And I tell you, I up here in Putnam Valley, I think the longest we've been without power is something like 4 days. But you know, the sheer and of course that's the problem. There's just too many people, so much to do, so little numbers of those who can attach. I remember during the four Easter, one of the four nor'easters that hit this area, the people who connected me and got me back online came down from Prince Edward Island in Canada.
yeah.
So
Well, this is an unprecedented event uh, for the state of Georgia. If you'd have asked me if I had ever would have seen tropical storm warnings up all the way up to the mountains of North Georgia, 300 miles away from the coastline, I'd have said you were crazy. And here we are. And in some ways, it's just a marvel to me to see it on the map. We have a few North Georgia folks watching the show tonight, and this is just to be clear, this is a really rare event. I was racking my brain because I remember sometime in the last 10 years or so, there was a tropical storm or hurricane where for the first time they put tropical storm warnings up into at least up to Atlanta. I don't know if they went all the way up to the state line. And I can just sort of remember seeing the map with those tropical storm warnings. I just don't remember what storm it was. But this is going to be it's going to be a crazy period come Thursday night into Friday morning, because this is not just the fact that a hurricane is coming on land, but you have a setup that, with both of our forecast experiences of when you add it together is almost a century's worth. We've seen tropical systems that have come up and then accelerated as they move northward up through the mid latitudes, produce more damage than direct hits from tropical storms and hurricanes that have occurred in the Northeast and in the Mid-Atlantic states. So this is a little bit unusual to see a similar setup where you're going to have an accelerating hurricane that when it gets on land, It's going to interact with this upper air storm, which I'll show you on the maps in just a little bit. And that's going to keep this storm a lot stronger than it otherwise would be. And it's going to take much longer for it to weaken. So that core is going to hold together to a large extent. And the folks in Georgia that are going to get under that core are going to experience a 6 to 8 hour rock and roll event, pretty much.
Wasn't there a time you were at News 12 Long Island and you were doing the morning forecasts at that time with Carol Silva and Lee Tyrell, and there was a major hurricane that I think may have actually had the possibility of threatening our area. And I think you were talking with either a forecaster at the National Hurricane Center, it might even have been the head honcho down there, and you threw a you asked him, I said, do you think that this storm could actually intensify because of its interaction with, I think it was baroclinicity, a baroclinic
Right.
ribbon? But basically, what you're talking about in this case, and didn't the guy like kind of try to blow you off? Like, what the hell is this guy all about? What is he trying to do? Show me up or whatever? Do you
Right.
remember?
Yeah, I do. And I think, this is, you don't see something like this. If you've lived down south, you don't see this sort of meteorological phenomena with regards to tropical storms and hurricanes when this happens. So I think it caught a few people off guard. Now, I've been wondering for days, because we've been talking about it here for days about the fact that the wind is going to be a very big deal. And I've been emphasizing that it was going to be a very big deal, even as far north as I am from the coast. And there was very little talk about it in the discussions, in the actual forecasts. But you know what? Let's lay that aside now because there's a lot that we got to talk about. And I just want to quickly say a big hello to everybody on the chat board. Joe and I welcome you here tonight to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm around. We still haven't decided what we're going to do for Friday, but we'll probably let you know tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn the notifications on so you don't miss us. And if you like the show, hit the like button. And just very quickly, we've got two super chat hits already, Joe. David Fuller, thanks very much. What are you looking at with the storm, Joe? Rain, flooding, wind. I hope you're okay. Uh, Lord willing, this isn't too bad. This is one of those situations, Joe, where you kind of hope the forecast busts, but it doesn't look like that's gonna happen. And Robert Lomnicki, thank you for hitting super chat. Very generous of you. Most appreciated. And I am going to stay safe because I'm going to be at my daughter's house, which is not in the mountains. It's in the metro area of Atlanta. So they're going to get the same weather I'm getting up here, right? They just don't have 100-foot trees going up, swaying back and forth. So I
Right.
just don't want to have to deal with that. So let's start off. I'm going to start
I just
off,
want to tell
Joe.
you, I just want to tell you, Joe, the thing that scared the heck out of me when I was looking over all the advisories and watches and everything else was the storm surge forecast for
Yes,
for Carabel, Florida, to Swanee River, Florida. Every time I hear that name, Swanee River, I always think of Ed Norton
Ed
playing.
Norton.
But Carabel, Florida, to Swanee River, storm surge forecast 15 to 20 feet. Now, my house is not 20 feet high, and I'm just thinking, I can't even imagine 20 a 20-foot high wave coming in and literally, swamping my entire home. Can you imagine living anywhere near the Swanee River or Carabel, Florida, and hearing a forecast like that? I would be going crazy right now. Like, of
Yeah,
course, you can't move your home. I mean, you can't do anything at your house. I think you can only evacuate. But my God, 15 to 20-foot storm surge. That's about as high up as I've ever seen for any hurricane, and that includes Katrina and some of the storms that we've seen in the past. 15 to 20 feet, unbelievable.
yeah. It's almost it's hard to comprehend. It just is. And this is where you evacuate and you hope that it doesn't happen
Say a prayer.
because sometimes they've some hurricanes in the last couple of years where it was the big storm surge was forecast and it didn't quite materialize because of last minute changes in track or timing or timing with the tides and all. So you just have to keep your fingers crossed, and if you don't wind up getting the worst of it, then that's a good thing and not a bad thing. Although there will be the usual people that you know complain about that. But no matter. Let's look at the latest satellite loop of Helene, which is now cleared the northeast coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. And if you look closely, you can sort of see the beginnings of an eye taking shape. There was a little bit of dry air that got entrained into the circulation, which has sort of slowed the process of the eye forming, but it is there. And the overall satellite presentation is very good. The outflow pattern is excellent, and it's beginning to respond to things going on upstream that is creating some, very, very strong outflow here in the upper atmosphere to evacuate the air. And you see all the feathering of high clouds on the northern edge of this. It is a sign that it is continuing to get better organized. And it's also, they've been indicating, forecasters have been indicating for days that this is going to be a large system in terms of geographic coverage. And you can see on the satellite that is indeed the case because we've got bands of rain already moving up through the main Florida peninsula, even though the center is well to the southwest of the Keys and South Florida. And also going on at the same time, and this is what much of Central and North Georgia are experiencing right now, and that is, we cleaned up this map here a little bit. There's a cold front that is approaching and slowing down and stalling. And ahead of that, we've gotten showers and thunderstorms and severe weather that's running southwest to northeast. And if you're in that line, the rain has been rather continuous. I gotta think that I've picked up at least a couple of inches of rain this afternoon from these thunderstorms that have rolled on through. We even had a few tornado warnings up around 3 o'clock this afternoon in some of the counties in northeast Georgia. Well, this storm is going to be riding up on the east side of that frontal boundary, and it's just a perfect setup here for this hurricane to move into the Florida Panhandle, and then from there it's going to go straight north. You notice, by the way, because everything's related, look how clear it is back through the plains and the Rockies, and except for the Pacific Northwest, so much of the West is dry and clear. I mean, that's sort of the sign of what happens on the backside, where you've got two extremes going on with the weather in the east being the way it is, and the weather in the west being a lot calmer. But in reality, the atmosphere is in chaos. The other thing to pay attention to with respect to the forecast that's important is this upper low that's sitting. When I'm talking about an upper low, we're talking about a cold feature in the atmosphere that goes way up to 25 and 30,000 feet. There's a cold upper low here that's driving southeastward, and this is creating the strong south-southwest flow along in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and into the southeastern part of the United States. And it's going to cause this storm to accelerate. And Joe, you can go ahead and explain what happens when these storms accelerate and then get on land.
Well, of course, when we look at hurricane forecasts, we always look for the maximum sustained winds, the maximum steady winds, which are usually found right around kind of like the donut center, if you will. I mean, you've got the high, which is the donut hole, and the donut, the actual donut, or the coliseum, if you will, is where you'll find the maximum sustained or steady winds. However, factor in a storm that is moving exceptionally fast, a forward speed. Usually tropical cyclones will kind of meander 5, 10, 15 miles per hour or thereabouts. When you have a storm that is moving at, let's say, 25 miles per hour or more, the forward speed of such storms, when you add that on to the sustained winds, actually makes for an even worse situation. Upon making landfall, the hurricane sustained winds can be even stronger than what has been measured, again, right around the center. And that, again, is due in part to the forward speed of the storm. So we've been talking about this now for the last couple of days, how this storm, as it approaches the Big Bend area of Florida, is going to start to accelerate. And that is only going to add to the major problems that they're going to be experiencing from this storm, beginning, well, actually overnight and into tomorrow, and particularly so just at landfall later tomorrow and into tomorrow evening. The maximum sustained winds predicted by the National Hurricane Center, Joe, at landfall 130 miles an hour, and that is a Cat 4, Category 4 hurricane with that potential of making landfall late tomorrow or tomorrow evening, again in the Big Bend of the Florida Panhandle.
And Cat 3, Cat 4. I mean, it could be a high end Cat 3. Maybe it gets to Cat 4. Either way, we're not. We're still talking about an extremely powerful hurricane, one way or the other. And one of the reasons, one of the things to note is the fact that when we're talking about the big storm surge that's being forecast, the problem here is that because of where this is tracking, you're tracking this tropical system. Hold on just a second. Let me get my Okay, it's all set. So the tropical system is taking a course something like this. Well, you've got southerly winds on the east side. All this water is being pushed up and squeezed into an incredibly narrow zone between the track of the hurricane and the landmass of Florida. That water is getting pushed up into the Big Bend area and right into where the line of landfall is. So these big surge numbers are not impossible, given the setup, given how the storm is approaching the coastline, and given the strength that we're looking at, and the forward motion, which is going to be picking up and accelerating as it gets close to the coast. And the other thing to note that there is some wind shear that is forecast to be right near landfall. I just wonder whether that may make any difference in this. It may not weaken the storm because at that point we may already be starting to see the baroclinic effects or the non-tropical effects of the energy that's coming down with the upper low. And I just want to show you here. This is the 3 kilometer NAM model. The upper low that I'm talking about, and we're looking at about the 500 millibar level, which is roughly 18,000 feet, give or take. And here's the upper low sitting right over Memphis, or is forecast to be right over Memphis tomorrow morning around 6 a.m. Down here, you've got Helene, and I'm going to put this in motion in right now, and you can see what happens. This upper low is going to be dropping southward, even further south than what guidance was showing us yesterday. It drops southward into Mississippi. As this drops southward, Helene starts to accelerate northward, making landfall in the coast. And then it just shoots, Joe. I mean, it literally flies northwards, probably going at least 25 miles an hour, maybe even 30 miles an hour, moving through the state of Georgia. So now it's getting the effect of all this energy. It may at some point, for those the meteorologists who get involved in the technicalities of whether something is tropical or something is not tropical, and it has to do with the maintenance of the core. As cold air gets involved into the system, it just sort of changes its character. Normally, if this were a slow moving system, it would just weaken relatively quickly once it moved into the Florida Panhandle into southwest Georgia. But because of all this, let's call it non-tropical energy with this upper low that's diving down into Mississippi, the core is going to maintain a lot of its strength, not all of it, but enough of it that we could certainly see. You're going to see you may see hurricane force winds in southern Georgia, or at least hurricane force gusts, and you're going to see tropical storm force winds and maybe even the occasional gust to hurricane force from Atlanta northward up even into parts of eastern Tennessee. Now, eventually, the colder air aloft is going to cause this system to start to really weaken, but that doesn't happen until it gets into Tennessee. And you can see how it pivots around this upper low. It just spins back to the northwest over Tennessee and Kentucky by the time we get to late Friday. This is again, this is a very very unusual situation to see. If those that in the mid Atlantic and in the Northeast, we see these sorts of things more often because of the way the upper air jet stream sets up. But this is a really weird setup. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
And you were talking about how when the storm, excuse me, comes into the Big Bend area and how it gets squeezed, so to speak. and it reminded me of the Venturi effect, which is the big drop in pressure as a fluid flows through a constricted area of a pipe. As the pressure drops, the fluid velocity increases. In this case, the wind velocity may increase because, again, of that constriction or that squeezing effect, so to speak. That you combine that with the fact that it's already a potent storm. I think I just saw Vincent Croce point out. I think the 8 o'clock update says 85-mile-per-hour winds as of and nine. I think I didn't. I
974.
974 millibar. So I mean, we're dealing with an incredibly intense and more intense system by the hour coming in out of the Gulf of Mexico. And as Joe mentioned, the interaction with that upper level low, it's almost, Joe, as if the upper low to the north and west grabs onto Helene and it plays like snap the whip, just woof, right through, cuts right through Georgia. And you're right. I mean, look at the way everybody, how, in the animation here that Joe's showing, look how it literally cuts the state of Georgia in half. It just zooms right across. And you're right, Joe. It's not going to be around for very long, 6 to 8 hours. But my goodness, that 6 to 8 hour period is going to be, well, maybe something that many people in Georgia who are living there now will certainly long remember.
This is the NAM 3 kilometer model, which is usually pretty good with severe weather and thunderstorms, mesoscale type events. But when it comes to these big hurricane events, it's not the best model in the world, but I show it because I think it just sort of illustrates what it's sort of it's going to look like to some extent. Also, the 3 kilometer NAM, if I read this correctly, gets the. I mean, I really, I do hope it's wrong because it gets it down to an 891 pressure before landfall. But just to be clear, this model loves to do that.
Yes,
It
it
does this
does.
all the time. So I would take that with a salt mine or the salt that it would to get that intense. But uh, the point that Joe made is correct. And just to give you a time sense here, so at this frame here, where it's just about on land, and when it comes to a stop, okay, that is at 11 o'clock tomorrow night. So it's a little bit slower than some of the other models were showing yesterday, maybe a landfall late Thursday afternoon. So it's about 5 or 6 hours slower, which you can argue that that means it's over the water for an extra 5 or 6 hours before landfall, and that might not necessarily be a good thing because that could give it a little extra time to get a little bit stronger. But so from 11 p.m. Friday Thursday night, so now we're at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. So it basically goes from the state line with Florida at 1 in the morning and reaches the state line with Tennessee at 9 in the morning. So 8 hours to cross through, it's roughly 300 miles from the coast to, from the coast of Florida. It's a little over 300 miles to northern Georgia. So if the NAM 3 is correct, we're talking about something that's moving at a 30-mile-an-hour clip. So if you've got sustained winds of, let's say when it gets up into North Georgia, for example, you have sustained winds of averaging, say, 35 to 45, or just to be conservative, let's say 40 to 50. I mean, just to make it even numbers, 40 to 50. If you're east of that low center, you're going to add another 30 miles per hour with because of the forward motion. So you're talking about wind gusts of 70 to 80 miles an hour potentially on the east side. If you're on the west side, the momentum is working against the storm in the sense that on the west side the winds are from the north. So you would see probably less in the way of wind gusts. You wouldn't see the higher wind gusts like you would if you were on the east side. And that's why the track here is so important. Because if you're east of that low track, you're going to experience some rough conditions, even in South Carolina and into the mountains of western North Carolina. The other thing I want to mention here very quickly, and we'll get into it a bit more in just a bit, but I just want to put it out there right now, is for western North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina, and northern Georgia, particularly in northeast Georgia. You're talking about um, orographic lift, southeast winds with tropical moisture coming into the mountains, and then that air rises. All the moisture gets literally squeezed out like a very wet sponge, and it will dump inches and inches of rain. I would not be at all surprised if we see one 12-inch or higher amounts in the mountains of western North Carolina and some of the areas of northeast Georgia. So we're talking about a significant amount of river flooding that could occur out of this.
And you said a few moments ago, Joe, you were talking about how the NAM 3 kilometer NAM tends to overdo things just a little bit.
Just a
I just want to
touch.
point. I just want to point out that at its maximum, where the storm is a few hundred miles, maybe a couple of hundred miles to the west of the west coast of Florida. That would be sometime later tonight or early tomorrow. And it had a pressure. This was the 3 kilometer NAM, indicating a central pressure of 887 millibars. Just in case you'd like to know what that is in terms of inches of mercury, 26.19 inches. You're not going to find that on your aneroid barometer that's hanging on the wall in your home or office. 26.19 inches of mercury. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, these
I think
they're
it's a
gonna
little bit overdone.
well, yeah, uh, but in reality, when it gets up into the northern part of the state, it may be like in the 970s, let's say,
Right,
970 millibars. That is pressure that you never see here. I mean, that would probably be a record low pressure, even lower than what it was in the superstorm of 19 March 1993,
right.
which buried northern areas of Georgia with a foot plus in a lot of places. The This is one of the other models. This is the HWRF, the HWRF, which is another short range model. And this is total precipitation. These yellow areas that you see in northeastern Georgia, western North Carolina, those are 12 inches plus. I don't know, there's the gradient of the color. The lighter the yellows are, the amounts go up to 20 and 24 inches. Uh, that's what the model shows. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come out that way. This particular model, Joe, brings it in just east of Apalachicola. It's down to about a 930 millibar um, at landfall, 930, which, if it becomes a Cat 4, it's not inconceivable it could get that low. And when it gets up into North Georgia, when it gets up into Central Georgia, when it's south of Atlanta on this model, it only weakens to a 945. And by the time it gets to North Georgia, it's up at around, I think if I'm reading that correctly, it looks like 966. And then it starts to pivot into Eastern Tennessee and then, back over into to near Memphis by the time we get to Friday night. So this is a big deal, folks. This is a rare event. You may never see this again unless you live another 50 years. And I don't know, Joe. I know you and I are booked for the next 49 years. I don't know if we'll make it to 50, but we'll see. Um, okay, so we have this is the I'm using the experimental uh, Hurricane Center forecast. This is what they're probably eventually going to go to, and the red area is hurricane warnings. Look how far inland that hurricane warnings extend into Georgia, as well as in northern Florida. You see the hurricane warnings. The blue tropical storm warnings extend up into the western North Carolina mountains and also in the eastern mountains of Tennessee. Virtually the whole state of Georgia is under a tropical storm warning, or either a hurricane warning or a tropical storm warning, and all of South Carolina, including northwestern South Carolina. Don't want to forget my neighbor to the east here, that we have tropical storm warnings up also for the entire state. And also, we've got tropical storm warnings going for the entire state of Florida. It's not often that you see something like
No, it's not often, and let's hope we'll never see it again in our lifetime. And I'm sure the folks who live down there in southern Georgia and the Panhandle of Florida hope so too. Did they have? Am I incorrect? Did they not have already this season down around the Big Bend area some kind of a tropical cyclone that affected them, or maybe I'm beginning to get confused.
Debbie. I think it
Debbie.
was Debbie. I think it was
Yeah.
Debbie.
So here's Debbie, and now here comes Helene. So
Yes.
unbelievable.
All
Who
right. So
said who said this was a this seemed to be running a below normal hurricane season? We've always said it doesn't matter if it's below normal or above normal. All it takes is one, and if Debbie wasn't enough, this is the one. At least for people who live down in the Big Bend area.
and this is also the seventh tropical system out of eight that make landfall someplace. And
Right,
that's the other thing. It's the fact that the ones we've had, all but one, Gordon, which was way out in the Atlantic and fell apart anyway as a tropical storm, all of them have made landfall in one place or another. Tropical storm and hurricane warnings. You can see all of Florida, obviously all of the coastal waters, all of Georgia, also some counties in eastern Alabama under tropical storm warnings. Underneath all these tropical storm and hurricane warnings that we see in the southeast, we have flash flood watches up. We're also going to be dealing with severe weather issues for tomorrow. And on the radar tonight, this is what I've had to deal with today. And this is the cold front that has produced heavy rain and thunderstorms that right now extend from southwestern Virginia down through western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, much of northern and central Georgia, including Atlanta and most of the surrounding areas. The green boxes, there are three green boxes there now that are up. Those are flash flood warnings. And by the way, this is going to be a problem because this rain is not related to the hurricane. And we're going to see rain continue overnight and even expand over the rest of the state overnight into tomorrow morning. That's being enhanced by the cold front, and then you're going to get into the moisture from the hurricane that's coming up. Now, what we're seeing in Florida, you can already see these bands here with heavy rains over the Keys with some thunderstorms. Then there's a break, which is natural. Then there's another band that runs from Miami to just north of Port Charlotte. Then there's another break, and then you've got yet another band, a lead band that goes from about Daytona Beach, Melbourne to just north of Tampa Bay, and then more downpours in northeastern Florida, southeastern Georgia. You see there's a flash flood warning up box that pops up in green, and on the northeastern corner of that red box is a tornado warning. And that's going to be another issue here, folks, with this cold upper trough getting involved with this tropical system. You're going to probably have severe thunderstorms in the mix and tornadoes. The I think there's probably going to be a rather there should be quite a few spin-ups with this, I think.
Maria Maria Belen Farias is asking about Gainesville, Florida. I've been to Gainesville. What will it be like there? Is there a chance of it to go more east? It really doesn't matter. I mean, for the way this potent storm is going to be, I think everybody across northern Florida is going to experience some bouts of very heavy rain and also strong gusty winds and also the potential for severe weather. So, even though you're not in the direct path of the storm, Maria, you're going to get a fair amount of adverse conditions from this particular uh, passage of this hurricane, although it's going to be, again, the main track is going to be off to the west of you.
The Storm Prediction Center tonight has a marginal risk for severe weather, so that means isolated severe thunderstorms over just about the whole state of Florida. Also, much of Georgia except the southeast, there are in general thunderstorms. And the marginal risk runs up the Appalachians into Western Virginia and West Virginia. On the southern end, it covers the Gulf Coast all the way back to the coastal bend of Texas. In this mix, we have some tornado risk, and you can see that the area is a 2% tornado risk for the state of Florida. Now, just to clarify, Um, you say, okay, well, that's 2%. That's such a small number. It is a small number, but it isn't, because when you're talking about tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, um, we're talking about very, very small events that cover a handful of square miles sometimes. So a 2% means that it's a 2% chance that there could be a tornado within 25 miles of any point in that green zone. Okay. So just to put it into perspective. Now for tomorrow, into Friday morning, this is where it gets busy. We have a marginal risk in South Florida. We have a slight risk in Central and North Florida. We have an enhanced risk in Southeast Georgia into a small portion of South Carolina. The marginal risk pushes up to the North Carolina state line. I'm sorry, the slight risk to the North Carolina state line. The marginal risk a little bit further to the north, and then backs into central Georgia and down into the Florida Panhandle. I got a feeling this is going to have to get pushed up more north and west, just my opinion on that. And this comes with a 5 to 10% tornado risk. That's a sizable number, okay? From
Right.
central and north Florida into South Carolina, the 10% risk for coastal Georgia, which includes Savannah, by the way. So that's a very, very high tornado. You don't see 10% too often. Even during severe storm season, sometimes you'll see 10% every once in a while, but you don't see 10% too often. So I think SBC is onto the idea that there's going to be a robust severe weather outbreak. And then on day three, which is Friday into Saturday, we still have a marginal risk for the southern Appalachians across North Carolina, much of South Carolina, and southern Virginia. So uh, the severe weather part of this, Joe, I think that's going to be one where it's going to be very interesting to see, given all the dynamics that we have between the depth of this hurricane and this upper trough that's getting involved, just how many tornadoes are going to get produced. And I have a feeling it's going to be quite a few.
Yeah, and Maria Belen Farias is saying that Gainesville has a lot of trees, and she is concerned that many trees may come down. I will tell you, just this is not really a specific or precise forecast or whatever, but I mean, just looking at the way this is going to come in to the Big Bend area, all places that are to the east of the storm, and that's probably where you don't want to be, to the east of a landfalling hurricane. But I'll say just conservatively for Gainesville, sustained winds of 30 to 60 miles an hour with gusts probably in the neighborhood of above 80 miles per hour at times. And this would be a short term thing because the fast movement of the storm. But as Joe just mentioned, you are in the same zone as an area of potential severe weather, which in some cases up across northern portions of Florida have as much as a 5 to 10% chance of tornadic activity. So, what else can I possibly tell you? Thunderstorms, severe weather, possible tornadic activity, damaging winds. You may not be, as I said, Maria, in the direct path of this storm, but you're going to certainly be close enough, and you're certainly going to feel the effects late tomorrow and into tomorrow night from this incredible landfalling storm.
WPC, the weather prediction folks. I always joke about the fact that they're always watching in the background, but I wish they are. And I think Bill Goodman might be watching in the background from NWS in Upton. So for the Upton folks that are watching the show tonight, big hellos. Uh, and also for Mount Holly in southern New Jersey. The red area here that you see in northeast Georgia into the western Carolina mountains, 12 to 16 inches of rain forecast by WPC. Now, that may include what's been falling now. We've already gotten a couple of inches of that for sure. And I can hear it through my headsets that it's raining heavily here again. And hopefully I won't lose power again, folks. Just bear that in mind. I lost power before. I hope I don't lose it during the show. So let's keep our fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. The dark brown that goes down to Atlanta, and also these patches that are around Birmingham, 8 to 12. The lighter next shade of brown is 6 to 8. That extends further south down to southwest Georgia. Picks up again just west of near Apalachicola. You got a bit little area of 12 to 16, so that's probably right along where the track of landfall. Rainfall amounts in southeast Georgia and in eastern parts of Florida. That's going to be driven by just how much thunderstorm activity develops. So that's mostly under 2 inches that's being indicated there. And along the west coast of Florida, we're talking 2 to 4 inches of rain, with a little patch of 4 to 6 from Tampa Bay down to about Fort Myers. The heavy rains on the north end extend up into southwestern Virginia. The darker green is 2 to 4, and it's been drought situation in much of southern Virginia. Probably did get alleviated to some degree this summer. 2 to 4 inch rainfall might not necessarily be a bad thing. Also to the west, we'll have an area. The upper low is going to be enhancing rains in central and western Tennessee and in western Kentucky. We have an area of 4 to 6 inch rainfalls there, and into southeastern Missouri. So there you have it. This is WPC's opinion on all of this. So I'm going to bring up a couple of the global models here, the GFS and the European. We'll take a look at those and see, what their opinion, what they're doing tonight. This is the latest 18Z run, and we'll just roll this along, and you can see the 18Z and the GFS in and of itself has had a tendency to have a bit of an eastward bias. So it brings it inland east of Apalachicola and west of Cedar Key. I think it looks like that's a 950. I can't see. So hold on, I'm going to get real close there with my glasses. 960, 960 millibars. That's only 14 millibars from where it is already, and shoots it up just a hair to the east of the other models. This actually takes it right into over the northeast corner of Georgia. The center does. And it's still a 978. Look at the gradient in eastern Tennessee with that 978 millibar low there. I mean, you've got to think these winds are going to howl at times in Georgia and South Carolina. The folks on the east side of the track are going to have the toughest time, and then of course it gets whipped back westward into southern Indiana, and I just rolled it back to the very beginning, but you can see what it does. This is by the time we get to the weekend, and you've got the leftover remnant low in eastern Kentucky moving eastward and off the mid-Atlantic coast. But there it is. Comes in, hooks back, and eventually the remnant low gets kicked out. It actually starts to develop again to some extent when it gets out into the open waters of the Atlantic. And by the way, not to put anybody on edge, but the GFS and some of the other models are trying to spin things up for later next week, but that's later next week. Let's get the first one done, and then we'll deal with the other ones when we get there. This is the European model, Joe. And the European today, this is the 12Z, about the same spot as the GFS, down to about a 953 or 956. Number's so tight. It's so inside that colored area. It's hard for me to see, but it's in the mid 950s. Let's put it that way. And then it moves it a little bit west of the GFS track in North Georgia. Just a handful of miles west, but definitely a little bit west. Looks like it comes right over my house as a 980 low by the time it gets to me. And then up into eastern Tennessee, central Kentucky, spins back west into Indiana and Illinois and continues to weaken. And by the way, for those I don't know if this is going to happen, but there's the breakaway moisture, Joe, that's in South and North Carolina, runs up into Virginia, and starts to run into that dry air. The European tries to actually bring rain for a short time, late Friday night, early Saturday morning, and for central and eastern Pennsylvania to New Jersey, and then gradually dissipates it as we go through the day on Saturday. I don't know how real that is.
Maybe it'll end up being Virga.
That could
You
very
know,
well be, because you're going to have a
clouds.
lot of dry air building into the Northeast.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So that,
even if there was precipitation, and I saw some forecasts just a couple of days ago saying this was going to be that Friday was going to be the pick of the week, and that the weekend was going to be gloriously bright and sunny. It doesn't look like that anymore, does it? Friday looks like we're going to still have a lot of cloud cover because that high pressure zone coming down from the north is not coming straight down, it's kind of going sideways. And so a lot of the dry air is more over central and upstate New York and central New England. And we get stuck still with a lot of lingering cloud cover. And then over the weekend, slowly, gradually, that dry air begins to try to erode or eat away at those clouds, allowing for maybe some sun on Saturday, and probably the best chance of getting sun would be on Sunday. And again, this is due in part to the fact that the storm, the upper level storm, is going to try to spin and bring more in the way of moisture in the form of clouds and maybe even a little touch of precipitation further north than what some of the earlier models were suggesting.
All right, let's take a look at the latest recon, where there was a fix at 8 minutes before 7 o'clock Eastern time. Looks like the pressure was around 975-ish, and the blue is the peak wind. Looks like we had two peaks in the last couple of hours at uh, roughly 70 knots. And then another pressure that's a little bit lower, just slightly lower than the one before. This one at 2252, it looks like it was around 975. The one at 2352, which is probably what the Hurricane Center had for the 8 o'clock advisory, looks like a 974. So the recon is doing its thing, and we'll get the graphic image of it, and this is what it looks like. And the plane has now flown, is flying westward away from the center, probably going to make a second fix of the center. It'll come around and go back over and find where the center is in about an hour. 975 was the pressure they found. The purple wind barbs on the east side that represents 64 to 83 knots sustained winds. So we do, I mean, clearly, and then you see the light winds near the center.
We just went over 100, Joe.
Oh,
Thank you.
and thank you. And Joe rings the bell when we go over 100 likes. And thank you very much for the 100 likes tonight. So the Recon's got 974. As it pulls a little bit further north away from the Yucatan Peninsula, if it's going to start, if it's going to deepen rapidly, it's going to start it very, very soon. So we'll see what we wake up to a pressure tomorrow morning um, when uh, when we wake up. If it's down in the 950s tomorrow morning, then you could probably bet that it's got more to go, and maybe it'll get down into the low 950s or even the 940s before landfall. Here's the intensity guidance, and you do have a number of models have it at least as a Cat 3. We've got three of them, almost four of them, that get it up to a Cat 4 in 24 hours from now, so right before landfall, before it starts to weaken. And of course, so if it makes landfall at 24 hours, at 36 hours, which would be, so this would be at 7 a.m. on Friday. At this point, based on some of the models, the center will be approaching the border of Georgia and Tennessee. We're still seeing a lot of the intensity models showing sustained winds of 60 to 80 knots. That's high.
Yep.
That's very high if that verifies. That is, I hope it's wrong. Uh, I really do hope it's wrong because I would hate to think we'd be seeing sustained winds of 60 to 70 miles an hour up here, let alone gusts in the northern part of the state anyway. Not forecasting that. I'm just saying that these are what the intensity models are doing. And you kind of adjust them to something that maybe is a little bit more practical, but you also have to bear in mind how unusual the situation is. The interesting thing about the hurricane tracking model guidance, Joe, is that it continues. I mean, it really has not budged. The tracks here are well to the left of the global models. And I'm surprised that they haven't at least tried to come together with what the global models have been showing, or that the global models haven't come further west. The European has to an extent, but that there is still a bit of divergence here. These tracks here, closer to the Alabama state line, wouldn't make it any less problematic for the areas, and for North Georgia, for Western South, and North Carolina. The outcomes probably would be the same. but it might make a difference for folks in western Georgia and eastern Alabama, where if the tracks are a little bit further to the left, it could be more problematic for them, which is why we see those eastern counties in Alabama under tropical storm warnings.
I don't know, Joe. If I were in your situation, part of me would want to get out of there and indeed, head south and go stay with my daughter in Atlanta. But the other half of me would be telling me like, you got to stay here and take a look and watch and see what happens. If any trees are coming down or whatever like that. Just out of curiosity of wanting to know what is taking place. And then again, if you do go down to your daughter's in the aftermath of all of this, your drive back, probably in your head, probably you'll be thinking about what are you going to see when you head on back, and
Well,
hopefully,
my neighbor's going to keep me abreast of anything that happens. My issue is now here's the thing. I stayed home. I was home for Hurricane Sandy. Okay. And that night, because we had every bit of 60 mile an hour sustained winds, with gusts to 70 and 80 for hours and hours and hours. And I can still remember the sound that my house was making because it was completely open on the east side of my house, the front of the house facing east. There were absolutely no trees for at least 1,000 feet, if not more. So it was wide open, and I was sort of in a little bit of a valley, you know, you know, relatively speaking. I mean, it's not like I had mountains next to me, just that it was a little bit below the surrounding neighborhoods. And with that east wind, without any trees blocking it, I mean, my house was making these moaning sounds. I literally at one point thought the wall was going to blow out.
yeah,
So thankfully, I had hardly any, other than a few shingles that came off the roof. I had hardly any damage, but I went to areas that had right nearby. The next morning, I went out to see the damage. I was astounded, but what at what I saw as far as tree damage was, thank God now we didn't have any trees around, but in the area surrounding me where there were a lot of trees, I saw things that you look at it. You ever look at an accident, when you pass a car accident and you see where the vehicles are, and you just kind of look at it and say, gee, how did they get like that? You know,
yeah,
like you'll see a car turned in an opposite direction or whatever. Well, I saw cars with literally whole trees through the passenger side window that came out on the other side, on the driver's side window. And I thought, how did that get there? It was looking around and sort of thinking, how did that physically happen? Because it looked like somebody literally took the tree and rammed it through, because I couldn't visualize how it must have happened when the tree came down, that it came down in such a way that it went through the window. That those images kind of stuck with me. And I live on the side of a mountain, and here's another problem for the folks that live here. You know, the wind direction, depending on what side of a mountain you live on, you could be having upslope or you could be having downslope. And I'm not sure. Having been here now for almost 4 years, I've seen situations with west winds in the wintertime, especially when it gets very windy, 35, 40 miles an hour. And I hardly ever feel the wind near ground level at my house, but the trees, on the other hand, are going like this, because my trees are up, they go up 75, 100 feet or even more. So I just kind of decided that I'm going to go to, after losing power this afternoon and thinking, okay, I'll probably lose power if I stay home regardless. So I might as well go to my daughter's house. At least if I lose power, they lose power at my daughter's house, I'm with family, which is nice instead of being being here, which I have my neighbors, of course, and they're wonderful. But I figured I'll just spend my time with my grandkids, and I'll come back. Whatever happens, happens. I just didn't want to have to deal with. I park my vehicle, Joe, under four trees. So I started to have thoughts of, okay, one of these trees falling on my truck, and then what am I going to do? So, and it's
under,
just for me, it just figures, as much as but the weather geek in me would love to stay to see how how things play out and broadcast from here. If I have power. But I'll feel better. I'll feel better personally if I'm sitting, if the dog and I are sitting at my daughter's house.
I think in that case, you certainly have spoke quite wise to be with family and a somewhat safer condition as opposed to where you are now, where, as you just said, a tree may fall on your car. So why possibly you know have something like that happen? Miss Spallerite a couple of minutes ago mentioned on the chat board, and I don't know how many of you were aware of this, that the three Hurricane Hunter, and she only mentioned two of them, but the three Hurricane Hunter aircraft are actually named after characters from Sesame Street. Kermit and Miss Piggy are two WP-3D or P-3 Orion aircraft, which fly into hurricanes at an altitude of about 10,000 feet. The aircraft are large enough and tough enough and can fly through the eye wall of a tropical cyclone, the most intense part of the storm. Gonzo is a Gulfstream 4 or G4 aircraft, an agile jet that actually soars over hurricanes at an altitude of up to 45,000 feet, as some hurricanes can reach heights of up to 60,000 feet. The jet flies high so it can observe the storms and their surrounding environment and their movements. So I don't know how many of you are aware of, but the three Hurricane Hunter aircraft are named after characters from Sesame Street or the Muppet Show, if you will: Kermit, Miss Piggy, and Gonzo.
By the way, Tom Contino asked me about my homeowner's insurance if it covers a tropical storm, and being so far inland, they don't have hurricane exclusions here. I don't know if that's going to change after after this year, but uh, I did. A friend of mine told me that during today, the insurance companies were not writing any automobile or homeowners policies in Georgia today. So apparently, and I'm thinking if you're writing homeowners policies today, that tells me that there are probably a fair number of people who have homes that they don't carry homeowners insurance on. I guess if they pay if you pay your house in full, if you don't have a mortgage, you probably have that option. I mean, frankly, I think that's a silly that I think that's a dangerous thing to do, but not have homeowners insurance. I mean, if you got a mortgage, you got to have homeowners insurance. There's no two ways about it. But for those of you who live in areas that are not affected by this is always a it's always a good time to sort of review your insurance situation, which regarding your homes, especially if you're a coastal resident, because coastal residents now, if they even write policies for where you live, there's a lot of places can't even get a policy. In Florida, it's almost impossible to get a policy if you live on the coast, and if you do get it, you you know it's you're paying tens of thousands of dollars a year in premium. But and you have hurricane exclusions where you're liable for I think was it the first 10% of the value of the value of your home. So if you have a $500,000 home, your deductible now from a hurricane is $50,000. So that's your out of pocket, 50 grand before the insurance company kicks in. And of course, when it comes to rainfall flooding, uh, that isn't covered by homeowners insurance at all. So you need to have special flood insurance for that, which is actually you can get from the government and is quite cheap. So just a note, and I think you have to when you get it, I think you have to. There's a 30-day waiting period before it becomes effective. So you can't buy it the day before. But these are all things that you should have. People should think about.
It's something that you only think about, or most people, it dawns on them like the day before a storm like this is about to hit. What about our homeowners insurance? Do we have flood insurance? What's going to happen? You only think about it just before the event. You don't really think about it when it's bright and sunny or whatever like that. It's something you really should think about, as far-fetched as it may seem. There's always that possibility of you getting into a zone of high wind or heavy rains, and that's when you need to make your uh, plans appropriately, not the day before.
Okay, it is now
And by the way,
8:37
somebody, I think it
p.m.
was Tom Contino on the chat board, when I mentioned about Gonzo and Miss Piggy and Kermit with the Hurricane 100. He said that his favorite characters were the two cranky old men up in the balcony on the Muppet Show.
Well,
And
that's
he
you
did,
and me.
that's yeah, right. We've had pictures of people saying you remind us of those two guys. That's Stadler and Waldorf, believe it or not. That's their names. Just I'll let you choose, Joe, which ones or which, whether or
Oh, it
not you're
doesn't
Waldorf or
matter.
Stadler.
We could trade places from. Oh, by
We're
the way,
interested.
this kind of struck me today. Now, I'm going to say something, and somebody's going to get bent out of shape over this. If you do, just get over yourself. But Joe, you know, and I was reading a whole slew of these on some local groups. Um, so there's been all this chaos about people's pronouns. Okay, and I thought to myself, you and I have, our pronouns, Joe, are they. Because when you have conversations you're in the middle of conversations with people and they talk about the weather and they don't know what you do for a living, you'll always hear them. They'll say, well, they said,
Yes.
and I'm running through all these posts in some of the local groups and they were just referring to weather people as they said. And I've said for years, I'm they, okay? I am they. I am not a pronoun. So
Yep.
I sort of felt like that today because I saw so many, um, so many people just use they said, well, they said, well, my biggest thing in all seriousness though was the fact that it finally, it got into the forecast today was the fact that hardly anything was being mentioned about wind in the last couple of days, and they finally woke up to it this morning. So I was very happy. So maybe the Atlanta Peachtree Weather Service office was lurking in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast last night.
Well, I just want to say one thing before we shut down for tonight, and that is that when and I can't speak for Joe, although he may have the same thoughts that I had. But when I was suddenly out of sound myself, my career in television was short circuited, and I suddenly couldn't find a way to get back in because I was presumed to be too old. Um, they wanted youth, they wanted pretty people, they wanted, and it really got me distressed. But then when I came here to team up with Joe to do this show, and I mentioned this at the weather conference on Saturday, people know, Joe, they know that when a serious weather situation comes along, they know where to tune to. Now, I don't have no idea how many lurkers are watching right now. I can tell you that on the chat board, I saw a number approaching 300 tonight, which is far more than we've seen in recent days and weeks because we had quiet weather, and we have over 130 likes up there too. And I said, back on Saturday to not a few people, people know people are aware that when a serious situation comes, they know where to get the truth. They know where to get the weather. They come here. It's not show business. It's not something that we're trying to get ratings. That we're just out here to help, to inform, and even to entertain from time to time. And it makes me seem relevant. I said to Renata after I couldn't get a job in television anymore. I said, well, I'm losing my relevancy. Nobody wants to hear me anymore. Nobody wants to listen to what I have to say in terms of a weather forecast or a weather situation, because again, I just don't fit the demographic television viewers. But here, I feel right at home, and I can't think of a better guy to team up with than somebody who I've been with and known for over 40 years, and that's Joe Chiaffi. And I think you and I, Joe, make the Joe and Joe Weather Show a very relevant thing for many people to tune into, especially at serious weather times such as these.
Well, the truth is, Joe, I can't stand the sight of you.
Well, thanks
No,
a lot.
you put it the best. I couldn't have said what you said better. I feel the same way. I if and you remember this. I have given you a number of wise phrases along the way when you came to FiOS, and I said, "Don't worry, this is great. We're going to have a blast," and
And
we
we
did.
did. and
Okay.
we did.
And I have said to you when when we were doing this, and I've had to remind you a few times along the way that this is far better than anything that we could be doing right now. We're doing our own show, our own way, and
Right.
this is no one is there, executive producer on your side permitted. Um, there's nobody here telling us what we can do, what we can't do, when we can do it, how long we can do it for, and cutting into commercial breaks and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, this is
You know
our
who was? Do you know who
this is
was at the
our
weather
thing.
conference? Do you know who was at the weather conference? Joe Addison Green. I
Oh, he
hadn't seen
was. I
Addison.
messaged him to congratulate him about becoming a dad soon, and I never heard back from him. I am furious with him.
Yeah. Well, I saw him on Saturday. I hadn't seen Addison since we all parted company in 2019. He was telling a couple of people as I was chatting with him. He said, those two guys, me and you, whatever. He said, those two guys are great. He said, those two guys, I love working next to them and everything. And all of a sudden, I just broke into the Bugs Bunny song, Overture.
Right.
This is it. And then he just started shaking his head and laughing. And he said, that's an example of what I went through and put up with when I was working with those guys for those years that we were all at FiOS One. So I told him, I said, Addison, I love you too.
I
It
used to
was
bust his
great.
chops when he would draw a snow map and he'd show it to me, and I'd always give it. I'd let him have it in a passive aggressive way and say, "Well, that's cute for a start." Or I would say to him, and he knew I was coming at it from a really joking point of view, or I'd say, "Oh, that map is perfect, but here's what you should change."
I remember I came. It was just before our first significant snowfall of the winter, and I guess you looked at the map and you made a couple of comments like that. He says, "Wait until Joe comes in," and I came in, put down my suit, my briefcase or whatever, and he was sitting there holding back a laugh and saying, "Addison wants to show you the map." And I'm thinking, and you're thinking in this case that the Hudson Valley was going to get maybe an inch or two. And here's this beautiful, and I want to tell you, there was nobody who made more beautiful maps
And he
on
could
the
great,
graphic
he
computer
got he
than
made
Addison.
great graphics.
He made great
I
graphics,
sucked
but
at it, but yeah, he was great.
but 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 he for the Hudson Valley, he had like 3 to 6 inches. So I'm looking at this beautiful map and thinking in my mind that it's going to be like only an inch or two. And I looked at it and I looked at it, and then I looked at him, and he's looking at me. He said, "So what do you think?" And I looked back at the map and I said, "You really want to go with this?" And all of a sudden, you just like guffawed, like, and again, the two of us, Joe and I, we've seen innumerable winter storms and saw innumerable different situations, and that's why the two of us were going, down here. And Addison was, he didn't just get into the business; he had had a few years already under his belt. Heck, he had already won a few Emmys when he was at CBS on the morning show, the Sunday morning show. But he was still green in some ways of forecasting, major storm events or whatever. And that's why we were going this way and he was going that way. And I said, "You sure you want to go that way, Addison?" But it was great. It was great seeing him on Saturday. And the fact is that he was telling people, working with the two of us, Joe, was a great experience for him. So
Wish we
yes,
could say the
Tom
same about
Contino, he's
working with
still
Addison.
uh,
Just kidding.
Tom Contino.
Addison,
He's
if
still
you're
there on his
watching,
show.
if you're watching this show, you know how much I love you. So
Oh, we
I'm
love
kidding.
you. We
You
love
know,
him.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I wish I could have been there. It would have been, but I just couldn't. I couldn't do that. There's no way
Well,
I was going to be able to get
the
up
next
there.
the next one is in 2 years in 2026. So maybe you might be up here, on a visit or whatever. And maybe
Come on, I mind, Rabbit. I mind.
we might be able to convince them to have the two of us to team up and host the festivities.
Well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we are going to have it. Look, tomorrow night, regular show scheduled at 7:35 p.m. Joe Rayo. But it is power permitting. Okay, assuming I have power where I'm going, and that I mean, I'm going to be in a metro area, so hopefully, chances are I'll have power. Uh, so just bear that in mind. If we don't have a show tomorrow night, it's probably because I've lost power. Okay, so just putting it out there, and we'll let you know if we're going to do something on Friday night, maybe a little short recap show,
A post-mortem.
a post mortem.
Yeah.
Just to maybe we'll come back on Friday just to make sure I'm still alive.
And
Um,
incidentally, for all of you baseball fans, the Mets and the Braves are canceled tonight and tomorrow. They have already scheduled a doubleheader on Monday. And I said, well, what happens if, one or both of them win a wild card? Is there a reason to play a doubleheader on Monday? Maybe yes, maybe no. But um, obviously, the hurricane has screwed up the sports schedule and the baseball schedule. And meanwhile, now the Mets, they were supposed to play tonight. Obviously, they're not. They may even be on a plane right now heading for Milwaukee to play the Brewers, but they're not going to play them until Friday. So they've got some downtime, and I don't know if that'll help them because they still have to win a few games to get a wild card and get a postseason berth. But in any case, quite obviously, in case you haven't already figured it out, no baseball tonight in Atlanta, nor tomorrow night as well.
By the way, I know. Also, I just want to say this real quick. I know we're going to say goodbye. A number of you have been, and I really do appreciate it very much. Your concern for me. So I'll be fine. That's why I'm going to go down, to my daughter's house. Actually, the weather potentially could be worse there than it is here, depending on what the track is. But nonetheless, I'll be going there early tomorrow. If I do go, it'll be tomorrow morning, and I'll be there long before the real the
Don't forget to bring
real
the dog, Joe.
rain and wind starts. Yeah, of course, the dog is coming with me. But I do
Yes.
appreciate a number of you have asked, concerned about me tomorrow. I'm okay, and I will be okay tomorrow. So just let you know. So keep your fingers crossed that we got power. Thank you for the super chats tonight from David Fuller and Robert Lomnicki. And thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for the 143 likes. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Night, night.
Good night, folks.